In a small lively town, Jenny lived with her vibrant personality and her endless search for perfection. One sunny morning, she decided to find a skilled tailor to make her some beautiful dresses for an upcoming event. She had visited nearly every tailor in her area, but none seemed to meet her standards. Her friend, Deborah, recommended a small shop at the edge of the market. "The tailor there is really good," Deborah said. Jenny decided to give it a try. When she arrived, she was greeted by a handsome young man with a calm demeanor. He introduced himself as Stephen. His soft voice and confident smile immediately made Jenny feel at ease. Jenny explained the kind of dresses she wanted, and Stephen listened attentively. He assured her that he would do an excellent job. She was impressed by his politeness and his neat workshop, filled with colorful fabrics and sewing tools. By the end of their conversation, Jenny had already decided that she liked Stephen, not just as a tailor, but as a person. A week later, Jenny returned to Stephen's shop to pick up her dresses. They were stunning, better than she had imagined. The stitches were perfect, the designs elegant, and the fit was just right. Jenny couldn't stop smiling. "You're very talented," she said, admiring her reflection in a small mirror. Stephen smiled and thanked her. They began talking, and before long, their conversation drifted from dresses to their personal lives. Stephen told her he had no family in town and had been living alone for many years. Jenny found herself drawn to his calm and caring nature. She noticed how he listened attentively, how he chose his words carefully, and how he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. By the time she left the shop, she felt a spark she hadn't expected. Over the next few months, Jenny found more reasons to visit Stephen's shop. Sometimes it was for a small alteration, and other times it was just to say hello. Each visit brought them closer. They laughed together, shared stories, and discovered they had many things in common. One evening, Stephen invited Jenny to take a walk with him. The cool breeze brushed against their faces as they strolled through the quiet streets. Stephen opened up about his dreams and fears, and Jenny did the same. That night, under the moonlit sky, Stephen confessed his feelings for her. Jenny, her heart full of joy, confessed that she felt the same way. Their love story had begun, and neither of them could have guessed the strange journey that lay ahead. Jenny and Stephen's love blossomed quickly. Within a year, they were married in a small ceremony. Their friends and neighbors were overjoyed for them. Jenny couldn't have been happier. She had found a kind, loving man who cared deeply for her. Stephen seemed perfect in every way. Not long after their marriage, Jenny gave birth to their first child, a beautiful baby girl they named Ada. Stephen was an attentive father, always doting on Ada and ensuring she was happy and healthy. Jenny marveled at how lucky she was to have such a wonderful family. Years passed, and Jenny and Stephen welcomed 2 more children, a boy named Junior and another girl, Faith. Their small home was filled with laughter, the sound of little feet running around, and the warmth of a happy family. Stephen seemed to love being a father, always playing with the children and helping Jenny with the household chores. But amid the joy, a small seed of doubt began to grow in Jenny's heart. She realized that, despite their 10 years of marriage and 3 children, she had never met anyone from Stephen's family. Every time she brought it up, Stephen would find a way to change the subject. Jenny's curiosity about Stephen's family grew stronger over time. She started asking him more direct questions. "Stephen, why haven't I met your parents? Don't they want to see their grandchildren?" she asked one evening while they were having dinner. Stephen paused, his spoon hovering over his bowl of soup. He smiled faintly and said, "They live far away, my dear. Visiting them is not easy." He quickly shifted the conversation to another topic, leaving Jenny feeling unsatisfied. Jenny didn't give up. Over the next few months, she brought up the topic repeatedly. Stephen's answers were always vague, something about his family being too old to travel or too busy to leave their village. He never gave a clear explanation, and Jenny began to feel uneasy. She shared her concerns with her best friend, Deborah. "What kind of man has no family around for over 10 years?" Deborah asked, her tone skeptical. Jenny couldn't answer. One day, while shopping at the market, Jenny overheard two women whispering about her husband. "Isn't he the tailor who doesn't have a family?" one of them said. "I heard something strange about him," the other replied, lowering her voice. Jenny's heart raced. She couldn't hear the rest of the conversation, but the little she caught left her feeling cold. Were there rumors about Stephen? What were they saying? She decided not to confront Stephen yet, but to keep her ears open for more clues. The happy life she had built with Stephen now felt fragile, as if a dark shadow was beginning to creep into their world. Jenny couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside her. Stephen had always been the perfect husband, but the whispers she heard at the market replayed in her mind. What could people be saying about him? She tried to focus on her children and household chores, but the questions gnawed at her. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Jenny decided to bring up the rumors. "Stephen," she began softly, "do you ever wonder what people think about us? About you?" Stephen looked at her with his usual calm expression. "Why would I care what people think, Jenny? As long as I have you and the children, nothing else matters." His answer was reassuring, but it didn't address her concerns. Jenny nodded and said no more that night. She didn't want to worry him, but she resolved to pay closer attention to the things people said about her husband. A few days later, she overheard another conversation in the market. A woman whispered, "I swear I remember attending Stephen's funeral years ago. How is he alive and married now?" Jenny froze. Her basket of vegetables nearly slipped from her hands. A funeral. Surely, this was a mistake. She hurried home, her heart pounding. That night, Jenny couldn't bring herself to ask Stephen about what she'd heard. She observed him closely instead. He seemed his usual self, kind, cheerful, and attentive to the children. If something was amiss, he didn't show it. Over the next few weeks, Jenny grew more distant. She found herself watching Stephen for any signs of unusual behavior. Was he hiding something? Or were the rumors just baseless gossip? She didn't know what to believe. Stephen noticed her withdrawal and tried to reach out. "Jenny, are you alright? You've been quiet lately," he asked one evening. Jenny forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired," she replied, avoiding his gaze. But inside, her doubts were growing stronger. She confided in Deborah again. "Deborah, I don't know what to do. People are saying strange things about Stephen." Deborah frowned. "Jenny, you need answers. If you don't confront him, how will you ever know the truth?" Jenny knew her friend was right. She needed answers, but fear held her back. What if the truth shattered the life she had built? Jenny couldn't live with her doubts anymore. One evening, she decided to confront Stephen. As they sat together after dinner, she said, "Stephen, I need to ask you something important." Stephen looked at her with concern. "What is it, my love? Why haven't I met your family in all these years? And why are people in town saying strange things about you?" Her voice trembled as she spoke. Stephen's face darkened for the first time in their marriage. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Jenny, I told you before. My family is far away, and people love to gossip. But they are saying you died, Stephen. I heard someone say they attended your funeral, she blurted out. Stephen froze. His expression was unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. Jenny's heart sank. Please, Stephen, I need the truth, she pleaded. After a long pause, Stephen stood up. All right, he said quietly. Let's go to my village. You'll see for yourself. Jenny wasn't sure if she felt relieved or terrified. The journey to his village might finally give her the answers she desperately needed, or it might confirm her worst fears. The following morning, Stephen informed Jenny that they would leave for his village in 2 days. Jenny prepared nervously, packing clothes and essentials for herself and the children. The children, unaware of the tension between their parents, were excited about the trip. They had always wondered about their father's family and were eager to meet their grandparents and other relatives. When the day arrived, Stephen led them to a small bus station. The journey was long, and the roads were bumpy, but the children's laughter and chatter eased some of Jenny's tension. Stephen was unusually quiet, his gaze fixed on the window. Jenny stole glances at him, trying to decipher his thoughts, but his face gave nothing away. After several hours, the bus stopped near a dense forest. We'll have to walk the rest of the way, Stephen announced. Jenny frowned. Walk? With the children, she asked, concerned. It's not far, Stephen assured her. Just trust me. The family set off, carrying their bags. The forest was thick, with towering trees that cast long shadows over the narrow path. Birds chirped in the distance, but the forest felt eerily quiet. Jenny's unease grew with each step. After an hour of walking, they reached a wide river. The water was calm, but its dark, murky surface sent chills down Jenny's spine. We need to cross, Stephen said, pointing to a small wooden canoe tied to the bank. Jenny hesitated. Is this safe? She asked, clutching Junior's hand. It's the only way to reach my village, Stephen replied firmly. I'll paddle. You and the children get in. Reluctantly, Jenny climbed into the canoe with her children, holding them close as Stephen pushed the boat into the water. The canoe swayed gently as Stephen paddled, his movement steady and precise. The journey across the river felt endless. The silence was broken only by the sound of the paddle slicing through the water. Jenny kept looking around, half expecting something to emerge from the depths. When they finally reached the other side, Stephen helped them out of the canoe. We are close now, he said, leading the way. Jenny's heart pounded. Whatever awaited them on the other side of this journey, she knew their lives would never be the same. After crossing the river, they walked for another hour before reaching Stephen's village. The air felt heavy, and the path seemed almost deserted. Finally, Stephen stopped in front of a compound with a large, overgrown yard. This is it, he said quietly. Wait here. I need to get something. Jenny stared at the compound, confusion etched on her face. The house looked abandoned, with peeling paint and cracked windows. Stephen, wait, she called, but he was already walking away, disappearing behind the house. Jenny felt a surge of unease. She held her children close and debated whether to follow him. But before she could decide, a voice called out from inside the house. Who are you? An elderly man stepped out, his face pale with shock. Jenny introduced herself, explaining that she was Stephen's wife and had come with their children to meet his family. The man stared at her in disbelief. Stephen, he whispered. That's not possible. Stephen died 15 years ago. Jenny's words spun. Her legs trembled as she clutched her children tighter. What do you mean? She stammered. The man's eyes were filled with sorrow. "Come with me," he said. "There's something you need to see." Jenny followed the elderly man hesitantly, her heart racing with every step. The children clung to her, their cheerful curiosity now replaced by fear. The man led them to a small graveyard behind the compound, shaded by tall, ancient trees. "This is where we buried Stephen," the man said, pointing to a gravestone covered in moss. Jenny's breath caught in her throat as she read the inscription. "Stephen Chukwuma, beloved son and brother, died 15 years ago." Her knees gave way, and she collapsed onto the ground. The children began to cry, confused and frightened by their mother's reaction. "No, no, this can't be," Jenny whispered, tears streaming down her face. The elderly man knelt beside her, his expression filled with pity. "Who are you, and how do you know Stephen?" he asked gently. Jenny struggled to find the words. "I am his wife," she said, her voice barely audible. "We've been married for 10 years. We have 3 children. He brought us here to meet his family." The man shook his head slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That's impossible. Stephen died in a car accident on his way back from the city. We buried him here ourselves." Jenny refused to believe it. "You're wrong. He's alive. He brought us here. He's my husband," she cried, her voice trembling with desperation. The man sighed and looked toward the forest. "If what you say is true, then it's not Stephen you married. It's his spirit." Jenny gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. "No, that's not true. He's real. He's been with us all these years." The man gestured toward the path leading back to the river. "If he's truly a ghost, he won't return here. Spirits cannot stay in the place of their burial for long." Jenny stared at him, her mind racing. Could it be true? Had she been living with a ghost for over a decade? She looked around for Stephen, hoping he would appear and prove them wrong. But he was nowhere to be seen. The elderly man led Jenny and her children back to the compound, where other family members had gathered. Their faces were filled with shock as they listened to Jenny's story. One of the women, who introduced herself as Stephen's sister, spoke up. "We've always known his spirit was restless. He died with unfinished business. Maybe that's why he returned." Jenny shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, he's been a wonderful husband and father. He can't be a ghost. He's real." The sister placed a comforting hand on Jenny's shoulder. "We understand your pain, but the truth is written in his grave. You've been living with someone who isn't of this world." Jenny clung to her children, overwhelmed by grief and disbelief. She wanted answers, but all she had were more questions. Where had Stephen gone, and why had he disappeared just when she needed him most? Jenny sat in stunned silence, her thoughts spiraling as the reality of the situation sank in. The children huddled close to her, their small faces filled with confusion and fear. The family members offered her water and tried to comfort her, but nothing could calm her racing mind. She stood suddenly, clutching her youngest child, and declared, "I need to find him. He wouldn't leave us here like this. He'll come back." The elderly man shook his head. "You won't find him here. If he's truly a spirit, he's already gone. Spirits cannot linger near their burial grounds for long. It's their nature." Jenny ignored his words. She gathered her children and stepped outside the compound, calling for Stephen. "Stephen, come back. Please," she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. The village was eerily silent, with only the rustling of leaves and distant bird calls filling the air. The children clung to her hands as they wandered through the village, searching every corner, but there was no sign of Stephen. Word of Jenny's arrival spread quickly through the small village. As she wandered the dusty paths calling for Stephen, villagers began to gather, their faces etched with curiosity and concern. An older woman approached cautiously. "You're the one married to Stephen?" she asked. Jenny nodded, clutching her children tightly. "Yes." "Do you know him? Have you seen him?" The woman shook her head solemnly. "We all knew Stephen. He was a kind soul, but he's been gone for many years. If he's returned, it's because his spirit had unfinished business." Another villager chimed in. "We've heard stories of restless spirits returning to live among the living. They don't mean harm, but they cannot stay forever. When their time is up, they disappear." Jenny's legs felt weak, and she sank onto a nearby bench, holding her children close. "But why? Why did he come to me? Why did he leave us now?" The older woman placed a hand on Jenny's shoulder. "Spirits are drawn to love and memories. Maybe he loved you so much that he couldn't let go. But now, the truth has pulled him back." Jenny stared at the ground, her mind clouded with grief. How could she explain this to her children? How could she make sense of it herself? Desperate for closure, Jenny decided to visit Stephen's grave again. She needed answers, even if it meant confronting the unimaginable. The elderly man from earlier agreed to accompany her, guiding her back to the overgrown cemetery. The children clung to her as they stood before the gravestone once more. Jenny knelt and placed her hands on the cold stone. "Stephen," she whispered, her voice trembling, "if you can hear me, please come back. We need you." The air around them grew still, and for a moment, Jenny thought she felt a faint breeze brush against her cheek. But there was no other sign, no voice, no presence. Just silence. The man beside her sighed deeply. "Sometimes, the dead speak in ways we don't understand. But maybe this silence is his answer. He's at peace now." Jenny's tears fell freely as she rose to her feet. She looked at her children, who stared at the grave with wide, innocent eyes. "We'll be okay," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. As they walked away from the graveyard, Jenny felt a strange mix of loss and gratitude. She had loved Stephen deeply, even if their love had been bound by a mystery she might never fully understand. Jenny and her children returned to their village with heavy hearts. The road was quiet, and the journey back felt longer than it had before. Jenny's thoughts kept circling around the same questions. Where was Stephen? Was he truly gone? Why had he left them without any explanation? When they arrived at their home, it felt different. The air seemed thick with an unsettling stillness. The children stepped inside first, and Jenny followed, her heart sinking as she looked around. The house, which had once been filled with the warmth of family life, now felt hollow and empty. Everything was exactly as they had left it before their trip to the village. The furniture was in its usual places, but something was wrong. The atmosphere was charged with a strange heaviness, almost as if the house itself had been waiting for them to return. Jenny walked into their bedroom, expecting to find Stephen's things still in place, but to her horror, there was nothing. His clothes, his shoes, his personal items, everything was gone. The closet stood open, its shelves bare. Even his favorite chair was missing. "Where is everything?" she whispered, a cold chill running down her spine. The children looked around in confusion. "Mommy, where's Daddy's stuff?" her younger son asked, his innocent voice breaking her heart. Jenny turned to the neighbors, who were gathered outside. "Did you see Stephen? Has he come back home?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. One neighbor shook his head slowly. "We haven't seen him since you left." "No one has. His car hasn't moved, and no one has come to the house. It's like he vanished." Jenny's mind raced. How could this be? Just days ago, Stephen had been with them, walking, talking, laughing. And now, there was no trace of him, nothing. The emptiness in the house felt like a weight on her chest, making it hard to breathe. That night, Jenny sat in the living room with the children, trying to make sense of the impossible. The darkness seemed to swallow up the room as they sat in silence. No matter how hard she tried to convince herself that this was just a bad dream, the truth lingered at the edge of her mind. Stephen was gone, and not just physically. He had disappeared completely, like he had never existed at all. The children eventually fell asleep, exhausted from the long journey and the emotional toll of the past few days. But Jenny remained wide awake, staring at the empty spaces in the house that used to be filled with Stephen's presence. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustling of the wind outside made her jump, as if she expected him to walk through the door at any moment. But he didn't. As the night dragged on, Jenny felt a coldness settle over her. A sense of finality washed over her, and she realized that maybe, just maybe, Stephen had truly been a ghost all along. A ghost who had loved her and his children so much that he had found a way to return, if only for a short time. Tears slid down her face as she whispered into the stillness of the night, "I miss you, Stephen. Please come back." But there was no answer. Only silence. The empty house felt colder than it ever had before. Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Every corner of their home, once filled with warmth and laughter, now seemed empty and cold. It was as though the walls themselves were mourning the loss of Stephen. She spent hours searching the house, hoping to find any clue, any trace of him, but there was nothing. The clothes he had worn, his shoes, even his favorite books, everything was gone. The children sensed the change too. Her eldest daughter, Ada, clung to her mother, not quite understanding what had happened but feeling the tension in the air. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" she asked, her voice full of confusion and sadness. Jenny didn't know how to answer. She had no explanation for what had happened. How could she explain to her children that their father had been a ghost all along? How could she tell them that the man they had known and loved had never truly been alive? That morning, Jenny decided to return to the village to find some answers. She needed to understand what had happened to Stephen and why he had disappeared without a trace. The drive to the village was long, and her thoughts were clouded with fear and doubt. She tried to shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but it lingered, heavy and suffocating. When she arrived at the village, she was greeted by the same elderly man who had led her to Stephen's grave. His expression was somber, and he looked at her with pity. "You came back," he said, his voice soft. "Yes," Jenny replied, her voice trembling. "I need answers. Where did he go? Why did he leave us?" The elderly man led her back to the graveyard, where Stephen's grave stood untouched, the earth still fresh. "He was never truly here," the man said quietly. "Stephen's spirit was restless. He came back because he loved you, but now he must move on." Jenny's heart sank. "He's gone." The man nodded. "He has moved on. His time with you has ended." Jenny stood in front of the grave, feeling the weight of the man's words settle in her chest. She couldn't understand why Stephen had disappeared. Why had he left her and the children without any explanation? Had their love meant nothing to him? Her thoughts were interrupted by her children's cries. Ada and the younger ones had followed her, and they stood in the distance, looking at her with wide, scared eyes. Jenny's heart broke for them. They deserved answers, but the truth was more than she could bear to explain. The elderly man watched her with a sympathetic gaze. "You must find peace, Jenny. Your family's journey here is done. It's time to go back home." Jenny nodded, her hands shaking. She didn't want to leave, but she knew the time had come. She couldn't stay in the village anymore. Everything about it reminded her of Stephen, of the man she thought she had loved, but who had been a ghost. As she turned to leave, the children followed her, their footsteps slow and heavy. They didn't understand what had happened, only that something had changed. The village, once a place of mystery and hope, now felt like a dark, painful memory. The ride back to town was quiet. Jenny didn't know what awaited her in the future, but she knew she couldn't stay where the past haunted every corner. The house was empty, her husband was gone, and the life she had known had crumbled away. When they returned to their home, everything was the same, yet nothing felt familiar. The silence was overwhelming, and the children clung to Jenny, sensing her sadness and confusion. They didn't ask where Stephen had gone, they simply stayed close, as though their presence could fill the emptiness left behind. Jenny walked through the house, her eyes scanning every room, every corner. It felt like the walls were closing in on her, suffocating her with the weight of the truth she had learned. Stephen, the man she had loved, the father of her children, he was a ghost. He had returned to her, but only for a time, and now he was gone. The house, once filled with love and laughter, was now quiet. Stephen's absence hung in the air like a heavy fog. She could almost feel him, his presence, just out of reach, but no longer there. For the first time in many years, Jenny sat alone in the living room, her children asleep beside her. The house was still. The world outside was still. And she was left with nothing but the memories of a love that had never been fully real. She wondered if she would ever understand why it had happened. Would she ever find peace? But for now, all she could do was hold her children close, protect them from the truth, and try to move forward. Stephen had given her love, but in the end, it wasn't enough to keep him with her. Days passed, and the pain of Stephen's absence slowly began to settle in Jenny's heart. She couldn't stay in the town where everything reminded her of him. The whispers of the villagers, the memories of their life together, were too much to bear. She had to leave. But where would they go? She couldn't go back to the village. The children needed to be safe from the confusion and pain that had come with their father's ghost. She had to protect them, and she knew that meant leaving behind everything she had known. She began to make plans to move to a distant town. Somewhere far away from the memories of Stephen. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only way she could start over. She wanted her children to grow up with a sense of normalcy, without the burden of their father's mysterious past. It was a difficult decision, but Jenny knew it was the right one. She couldn't stay in a place that held so many ghosts, both literal and emotional. It was time for them to find a new life, a new beginning. As Jenny packed their belongings, the children helped in their own way, each one understanding that things were changing, but not fully understanding why. The house, once filled with the joy of a family, now stood empty, just like the love Jenny had thought was real. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Jenny was determined to give her children a future free from the shadows of the past. They would move on, even if it meant leaving everything behind. And in time, she hoped they would find peace, even if she never fully understood the mystery of Stephen. Thank you for watching till the end. Feel free to check out my channel for more exciting stories.